Yeah, I mean, the thing is, no matter what you do, if you want to get to a high level, you have to work, right? So, I come up in an environment in New Orleans where the music has a history, but because it has a history, it means that you have to go through more lines of challenges, right? It's not the type of place where you can pick up a trumpet and just because you like to play the trumpet, people admire you for playing trumpet. It's a type of place where when you're 10 years old, you walk into a band at your school and there's 100 trumpet players. And then when you get to high school, it's 200 trumpet players, right? So it's probably the most competitive environment for creative improvised music in the world, because there are thousands of people that play the instruments at a very high level. So to gain resources in an environment like that means you have to practice and you have to refine more than just the notes and the scales. You have to learn to be able to tell stories, which means you have to listen, you have to develop taste, right? So I was very fortunate because I was raised in a musical family. My uncle is a legendary saxophonist, a guy named Donald Harrison Jr. My grandfather was a folk singer and a great chieftain in our culture, in the Black Indian tradition. And so there were things that they went through that they could impart to me, which helped. But ultimately, whatever generation you come into, you're going to run up against problems and things that you have to develop, right? After leaving New Orleans, I went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston, which is arguably the most competitive music school in the world. And then after that, I signed a deal to Universal Music, which is a very competitive environment as well. So I think anyone that is conjecturing or guessing that simply because one is born into an environment where there's a history of music, that automatically makes the environment sort of dreamy, I'd caution them not to accept singular or single stories or narratives about people's lives, right? If you want to know about what someone's experiencing or you're guessing about what they're going through, then think of your life. If your life is only one story, then sure, then accept that. But if your life is more than one story, then think of other people's lives this way too. I don't view myself as being a competitor, because what we're doing is art, and obviously there's a certain degree of subjectivity there, and no one is going to be able to express your truth more than you can express your truth about your experiences and the things you've seen or endured. But I think in terms of the moments where you are surrounded by people that also do the same thing, that are jockeying for position and fighting for resources, what can become tiring is when you see yourself growing up in a community where people have to fight that hard for resources. Not the fight of it, not the things that you go through to try and get better. Those aren't exhausting. It's like people have to work. You wake up all over the world and people are working. They're either working in a coal mine or an office building, but people work. So that was never a problem. The issue for me was living in an environment where people had so little that they had to fight over the small things that they were eligible for. Well, I think, what's beautiful about that is for you to get the information that you're looking for, you just ask the question, right? The tactic that the human being uses as a means of procuring more information are questions. It's questions. So how can I have a strong musical dialogue with an audience or with a band and build a relationship where we're not asking each other questions, where we're not probing each other, where I'm not creating moments where you have to question whether or not you like or dislike, where you have to question texture, where you have to question what is the melody, where you have to question these things. Obviously, it goes in waves. It can't all be questions, because even if you and I have a conversation that's all questions, I'm going to get bored and so are you, right? So in order to create a more meaningful and more profound relationship between the listener and the artist, I have to figure out ways of interrogating the audience, right? And also the artist. So when the saxophonist is just playing something, we figured out musical ways to be able to question the improviser that makes him conclude whether or not he really wants to play that. You see what I'm saying? Because if you play it now, maybe that doesn't make sense based on the environment and what we're building harmonically. So it makes you have to take a step back and reevaluate how you're going to communicate. which in terms of the relationship that you're building with the audience, to me, this is a more beautiful type of relationship, right? It's not me just telling you everything and concluding that this is my experience. It's me saying, this is what I've been through, this is what I've seen. What have you seen? What does this make you think of? Does this remind you of anything? And then to try and take that reaction and create more. Yeah, well, I mean, my style, my fashion is based in a necessity in my life. I think a lot of times people will come and see someone and they're adorned in gold, maybe, you know, Akan or Wolof or, you know, all of these different tribal things that I grab from different parts of the world. I have things from the Hmong culture, I have Indonesian things, I have things that come from Peru, all these different jewels, from Torag things, Ganawan things. And a lot of times when people say, they say, well, why are you wearing all these things and why do you mix them up? I think there are two sides to it. The first thing is that I do not consider myself as just an American person. I'm a human being. I consider myself a world citizen. I am as much at home here as I am anywhere else. That's how I deal with people. I don't think the universe bears me any harm, and I try to emit the same thing to people in my daily walk, in my everyday relationships. But if I am being honest, part of my fashion is pointed to create questions. There's 25 hours of traveling. Maybe there's 6 of those hours is between airports, right? And when you're in those moments in airports, people are looking at you, they're concluding. When I'm traveling around, it's 7 6-foot black men, right? Which to people that are not around us, they may not see guys that are really loving, sweet, funny, beautiful people from what they see on television or what people tell you you should believe about me. So more often than not, when someone sees me in an airport, they already think they know who I am. They already think they know my story. They already think they know what I'm about. Sometimes they may think, oh, he's a drug dealer or a criminal or a hood or any of these things. Because their diet of what a black person is and isn't comes from them watching MTV and watching movies about black people in ghettos that black people don't pay to create, right? So this is somebody else that pays to create a movie and a narrative, and then they project that onto the world, and then you accept it. So part of the reason my fashion is designed in the way it is that when you see me dressed in this way, it's very difficult for you to conclude that you know anything about me, because the things you're looking at, you've never seen before. So you can't just say, oh, I know what this person is about, when you're looking at things that you can't identify. It forces you to ask yourself a question. I've never seen that before. It's interesting. Or do I know what that is? Or what does that remind me of? All these things, all these questions help you build a narrative of me that makes me more human. And so this is why I dress this way. It's to sort of, to clear a lot of that energy out by making the viewer have to question what they think they know about me. This is a word I've heard a lot. You hear it more often in like indie rock music or alt rock music, right? But it's just another word for a different type of production acumen, right? So as opposed to just building the environment with the sounds of the acoustic instruments, a lot of the music that we've been making recently has been sort of also layered with things that come from Ableton or Logic or Reason and these types of programs where we build environments and then we play to the environments that we've built, which is a very different way of approaching creative improvised music, because there are all of these textural things that don't exist on some of these instruments, so which is fun to play with, you know. But it was just me pointing out that what was going on the records was more than just the trumpet playing, that there was a lot of composing that was going on behind the scenes as well. I prefer to think that when there are moments where I am caught off guard by something, or something shocks me, and maybe someone is reacting in a way that I don't think they would react, even in musical terms, moments where I may not have sounded so good or needed to learn a lesson, I always look to those moments and I'm very grateful for them, right? Because if I exist in my comfort zone all the time, it's very difficult for me to grow, and even more difficult for me to impart what I've learned in that moment where I've grown to other people. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if it's an easy route, then it's hard for me to remember how I got to where I got. So I can't teach someone because I didn't actually have to go through the process. Do you get what I mean? So I love those moments where I'm uncomfortable, where big mistakes happen, and then you have to try and figure out how to fix them. To me, it's more like life, right? It's like something happens in your life, and then you have to learn how to cope with what happened, and how to move on, and how to still create some love out of what happened. So to me, that's like the most fun part of music. Yeah. Tom York is a very important composer in my life, right? Obviously, I come from a jazz background, so I grew up listening to Duke Ellington and Charlie Mingus and Count Basie and their compositional acumen. But to me, Tom York, his approach to composition, the interplay between the relationship of major to minor, what he does, sort of the palindromic things that he creates rhythmically, his understanding of rhythmic counterpoint, the layers of drums, what the tenor drum should be doing, how they answer the bass drum, how they answer what's going on in the bell patterns. All of these things, you can hear this is a person that pays close attention to those things. And so I think compositionally, his mind is a very beautiful mind, right? Because you can listen and you can hear that this is a person that has synthesized and processed the rhythms that have come out of all different cultures. He's processed rhythms that come out of India. He's processed rhythms that come out of West Africa, the Latin diaspora. You can hear those things in addition to the harmonic acumen. So being around him and watching his process was really good for me. Because he's in his space, and it seems to me like if he's decided that he's going in a direction, he's going to fully go in that direction. He doesn't just stop 10% of the way. And so I appreciate how valiant he is as a musician and an artist, you know? So I learned a lot from that band. Also, I was with Mos Def for a little while and got kind of checking out like his cavalierness and the way that he is able to channel the people's energy and what he emits when he jumps into when he jumps on the stage, what he's broadcasting in those moments. You see what I'm saying? There's a certain amount of machismo and gravitas that exists there. It's a similar thing when I work with Prince, right? When I was around him. So I've learned a lot from a lot of different bands, but there are also bands that I play with and musicians that I made art with that I haven't learned shit from. There are a lot of artists that are out here that don't really put in any work. You know what I mean? They're just popular. When you listen to Tom York or you listen to Saul Williams, their music is about communicating something. Yeah, they may make a lot of money doing that, maybe yes, no, who knows. But ultimately, when they leave, you're a different person. You've had to challenge yourself. You've had to reevaluate what you think about yourself and what you think about them. The stage is kind of a mirror, right? And whether or not you're going to walk around outside the same way you were yesterday. Other artists, they're just trying to sell you shit. I think music has one of the most pointed effects on the community than all of the arts, right? Because of exposure, right? Sometimes it's very difficult to say, okay, if you want your child to understand analytic cubism and the tenets of that with Picasso, there's a lot of decoding that has to happen before they get that, you know? All of these objects are disassembled and then depicted from multiple vantage points and then reassembled to create a more global viewing of the object. Like explaining that to a 6-year-old can be difficult, right? You can just show it to him and maybe he likes it, he doesn't like it, right? But I think the exposure thing does a lot to art.